Hello everybody. Last video we gave our introduction to the book of 2 Kings. We went through the first chapter. Today we are on chapter number 2. Free PDF out on our website if you want to go download it for yourself. Let's talk about when these events happened historically. The events of chapter 2 probably fell within the window of about 900 BC to 890 BC, right at the end of the ministry of Elijah. We're going to talk about him leaving, not dying, just leaving in chapter 2. Our important characters in this chapter include Elijah. He was a prophet of God, and in this chapter, he's going to go to heaven. He's one of the very few individuals who we've talked about who have never died. There was one in the book of Genesis, do you remember? Enoch. God took Enoch, and he never physically died. We're going to see something similar happening to Elijah here. Then we're going to talk about Elisha. Elisha has been the student of Elijah, and he's going to take Elijah's place as the prophet of God in Israel. Now, we have this group of individuals who we don't know a whole lot about. They're called the sons of the prophets. These were men who were students, seemingly, of the prophets, and they were servants of the prophets, and they probably received some kind of religious education from them. But other than that, we don't know a ton about them, but they're going to be mentioned several times here. And then we have two she-bears, two female bears to list as characters, I guess. And they are going to be used by God to punish some people who mock God's prophet. Elijah and Elisha are going to be on the move in this chapter, so we've got several cities to highlight. Elijah and Elisha went first from Gilgal to Bethel, then to Jericho, and then to the Jordan River. But Elisha wasn't done after that. He does some more traveling. He goes from Bethel to Mount Carmel, all the way over by the Mediterranean Sea, and then to Samaria. All right, so now let's talk about the interesting departure of Elijah from the earth. Section number 1, verses 1 through 14, Elijah is taken to heaven in a chariot of fire. So Elijah was not destined to die like all of us and like all the other men pretty much who have lived on the earth. God intended to take him to heaven in a whirlwind, and this was revealed to Elijah before it actually happened. It was revealed to Elisha as well. Well, one day when this date was approaching, Elijah tried to get Elisha to stay behind. He was going to go from Gilgal to the city of Bethel. And he said, Elisha, why don't you just stay here? But Elisha refused because he knew that soon his master was going to be taken. At Bethel, this group of individuals, these sons of the prophets, asked Elijah if he knew that his master was about to be taken to heaven, because evidently God had revealed it to them as well. And Elisha responded that yes, he was aware of it. Now again, Elijah tries to leave Elisha behind. He travels to Jericho next, but again, Elisha refuses to leave him. And interestingly, in Jericho, the sons of the prophets ask Elisha the exact same question. Do you know that your master is about to be taken by God? And he says, yes, I'm aware. Please don't say anything about it. And then we see Elijah wanting to travel from Jericho to the Jordan River. So third time's a charm, right? He tries to leave Elisha behind. And guess what? It didn't work. Elisha decides that he's going to go with him to the Jordan River. And so at the Jordan River, Elijah does one of the interesting things that we'll see down here in this area. He takes his cloak and he strikes the water of the Jordan River with it, and the water parts, and him and Elisha are able to go over on dry land, kind of like when the Ark of the Covenant was moved into the Jordan River and the water parted so the Israelites could pass over. A little bit different, but kind of the same concept. Now, Elijah knows that he's about to leave the earth, God's about to take him, and he asks Elijah a question. He's like, is there anything that you would like for me to do for you before you leave? And Elisha says that he would like a double portion of Elijah's spirit. Elijah says, well, this is kind of a hard request, but I'll tell you what, if God allows you to see me as I am taken to heaven, then this request of yours will be granted. After they talked a little bit more, a chariot of fire pulled by horses of fire separated the two friends, and Elijah was taken to heaven in a whirlwind. Pretty interesting event. We don't have a ton of details. That's pretty much all that we're told here in this text. Then Elisha picks up Elijah's cloak, which had evidently fallen off in this chariot ride. He went back to the Jordan River, struck the water with it, and the water parted again, and he was able to cross back over the river on dry land. That takes us to section number 2, 3, and 4, which discuss some of the events of Elisha's early ministry as the prophet of God, now that he's kind of taken over for his master. Verses 15 through 18, a search party for Elijah. The sons of the prophets urged Elisha to send out a search party for Elijah in case God had just moved him. Kind of interesting. They thought, well, maybe he's moved Elijah to a different city or to a different hill or mountain or somewhere. We should send out a search party looking for him. And Elisha says, no, there's no reason to do this. But they pressed him on the issue, so he allowed them to send the search party, and guess what? They found nothing. The next section, verses 19 through 21, tells us about a miracle that Elisha performed. The men of a particular city came to Elisha and they asked him to help them with their water problem. They really liked the city that they were living in, but the spring of water was bad. And so Elisha threw a bowl of salt into the spring of water and it was cleansed. He cleansed it in the name of the Lord. Now for our last section, verses 22 through 25, attack of the two bears. If you wonder why there's a bear on our first page of the outline right at the top left corner, this is why. It comes from this story. As Elisha was traveling to Bethel one day, a group of young boys started mocking him. Specifically, they were calling him bald head. Elisha cursed them in the name of the Lord, and the Lord had two she-bears come out of the woods, and it says that it tore 42, these bears tore 42 of the boys. And then we're told that Elisha moved on from there. He went to Mount Carmel, and then he went to Samaria. I don't know if you've ever seen those t-shirts. They just have two bears on them, and then they say, respect your elders, 2 Kings 10, 22 through 25. It's kind of a joke, but I think this text, if it does communicate something to us, I mean, a lot of people look at this and they're like, why on earth does God send these bears to attack these young kids just for mocking the prophet? It's like, well, maybe we need to reframe that a little bit. Maybe they weren't just mocking the prophet. Maybe God really cares about the respect that we give to elders, to leaders. He mentions that even in the New Testament about political leaders and people who he's appointed to power and how we ought to respect them. So, we're often very flippant, very quick to criticize leaders, spiritual leaders even. God's showing here that maybe we should be a little bit more careful. But that wasn't actually our application for today. Let's go down to our application section. The sons of the prophets show us that even in the most godless cultures, there will always be some who want to serve God. The kingdom of Israel had been a moral wreck for years at this point, but there were still a few places where lights could be found in the darkness. So just remember that if you find yourself in a culture, a city, a nation that has no love for God, that there's always going to be a remnant of people who are God's people. Find those people, cling to those people, work with those people to help other people who are stumbling out of the darkness, seeking the light of a Savior.